Greetings from CenturyLink Field. This is full-time special MLS Cup Final Edition. The seagulls are swirling, the place is empty, but I'm here to recap not just what we saw here today, but the MLS season. And there's a lot to take in on. You could say this was the most important season in MLS history because as we approach 25-year anniversary, so much records were broken, including here today, which we'll get to. And before I get to the whole season, I want to reflect on what we just saw here at CenturyLink Field. It was a spectacle. And if I had a dollar for every time I walked around Seattle this weekend and somebody said, we should have been in LA this week, I'd have probably had 90 bucks, which could get me a nice steak dinner and maybe a couple glasses of wine. But it wasn't in LA. And what I tell these people when I hear that is that patience pays off, and these two clubs, Seattle and Toronto FC, are case in point. When they arrived, Seattle were a great team. They kind of they arrived right after each other. Seattle was a team that made the playoffs every year, but never got close enough to an MLS Cup, let alone win it. Toronto came in, was the worst franchise in MLS for a long time, and then they were able to figure out a few things. So the journey was worth the wait, and that's what I tell LAFC fans as they get ready to perhaps host one of these next year. LAFC Stadium, Bank of California Stadium, hosts 22,000. This, they set all sorts of records. 69,000 plus, which was a CenturyLink Field sporting record. There was a concert that I have to find out what it was. I imagine it's a Paul McCartney, a Pearl Jam. By the way, Eddie Vedder was here. 69,000, a Seattle soccer record, so record-breaking across the way. I did have a chance to participate in the March to the Match. It was spellbinding. People upon people walking to the stadium. This was a Seattle event. Everywhere you went, you saw Seattle colors. This was a big deal for everyone here in the city. So the March to the Match, and then we get our third MLS Cup between these two franchises. 3 is enough for me, by the way. I'd like to see something different. This holds an important place in MLS Cup final history. Both got a cup, their first cups. Now Seattle has 2. They weren't great games. This finished well. Toronto was the better team in the first half, but as the game wore on and Victor Rodriguez came in, he changed it in a big way. He scored the second goal. I thought Jordan Morris was my MVP because of his activity. Doesn't matter. Seattle happy, and they do it for the first time in front of their fans, which is no minor detail. Brian Schmetzer is from this part of the world. Jordan Morris is from Merritt Island, which is, you could spit and hit it, but I'm not into spitting at any direction at this point in my life. So that is special. That connection, you always want to do it at home. And Seattle, when the first 2 MLS Cups were in Toronto. So this was an important moment for the sport. And Seattle it really is the best club we have for everything they have done in MLS history. Now they have 2 MLS Cups, which is tied for 3rd. They are tied with Houston, Sporting, and San Jose. The Galaxy have 5. DC United have 4. So Seattle is in a good spot. They are right now the gold standard. Atlanta and LAFC are matching that standard in a lot of ways, but the history that Seattle has done, and now with the Cups, sets them above. I have a new pecking order, which I'll get to as well. I keep telling them to get back to stuff. So we talked about the record here. There was also an MLS Cup playoff average attendance record, 34,000 per game, which beat the old record by 5,000. So people coming out, they had the right games. The new playoff format was exceptional. Seattle and Toronto were the 2 teams best equipped to manage this new playoff format and be successful. Hindsight's 2020, but if I could do it all again, I would have probably put them in the final. I did have Toronto in my bracket. But now the folks here in Seattle celebrating this, and we look forward to see what happens in the new season, which will happen very soon in February. Getting back to the season, Seattle made the history in the back end. The history in the regular season belonged to LAFC. And you look at Carlos Vela, 34 goals, a record that I think should stand for a little bit. He broke the record from Joseph Martinez a year ago. The points record for LAFC, that should stand. The goals, they tied it with the LA Galaxy. I'd be hard-pressed to see a team match that. New teams are coming in, and we'll see what happens in that case. But I think you look at all those records from LAFC, it's still a young league, so records are dropping. This attendance record. Soon there will be years where no records break, and I think we all look forward to that. That's going to be a moment when we say this league is now inside the bloodstream, and It is what it is, and teams are established. Still a lot of change ahead. There will be 5 new teams, I think, the next 3 years. Nashville and Miami coming in next year. 7 new stadiums to be built, including the one at Bank of California Stadium, one in Cincinnati, and many other for the new expansion teams coming along as well. So a little recap of the game, and then a look at the league. And I have set a new ruling class Major League Soccer. I have my list, and this is a list of the teams, where they stand currently in 2019. We have a established ruling class at the top. The teams that are setting the trends and making the other teams keep up with them along the way. Number 1 is Seattle, not just because of what they did here, but because of the length of time they have been as dominant. So Seattle, number 1 in my ruling class rankings. Number 2, Toronto FC. This was a little bit harder, but because of what they've done the last 3 years, they get it, and they've also been huge in the development and the proliferation of Major League Soccer in Canada. Younger players starting to get into soccer a little more as a result. That is no minor detail. Our partners in Canada, a big reason why this league is getting stronger and stronger. Number 3, Atlanta United. They won MLS Cup a year ago. Almost got back again. They won the Campeones Cup, which is an important, even though it was a one-off game, they beat Tigres, and that is important because MLS needs to beat the Mexican teams. If they beat Mexican teams, that is the eureka moment internationally. Atlanta, LAFC, Seattle, and who am I forgetting? New York City FC and Montreal will get a chance to win it, and I think an MLS team will win CONCACAF Champions League in 2020. You heard it here first. That's a bold statement, but that's what I'm all about. Number 4 in my ruling class, LAFC. Haven't really won anything. They won the Supporters' Shield this season, but I think everything they have done has set the tempo. And I will add this about LAFC. They have changed the game in 2019. When they won the Supporters' Shield, they showed every team how you have to celebrate winning a Supporters' Shield, because it's important. There are multiple trophies here. MLS Cup is number 1, based on what we saw here, but Supporters' Shield has to be celebrated, and LAFC did it in a big way. They also, and I hosted it, had a big ceremony to announce MLS MVP Carlos Vela. They did it at their stadium, and it looked a lot like the way the NBA celebrates their MVP. So I think if you can parallel the NBA, that's a good thing. So LAFC, a strong number 4 in my ruling class. Number 5, LA Galaxy, and as long as Zlatan is still there, they are very prevalent. They were the social media sensations in large part because of Zlatan. They are the team that's won it 5 times, but they need a lot of work. But with the adjustments and they get that work, they could be right there, and they could be that club that we talk about. Some teams that I gave honorable mention: New York City FC. This is just for 2019. Clubs like DC United obviously have a record, but they have kind of fallen off the back wheel here. Portland Timbers, because of their constant playoff success and their ambition. And I like what Inter Miami and Sporting Kansas City. Inter Miami are a real intriguing outfit looking ahead to the next season. As for next year, it's so hard to predict what will happen. I think a few little talking points to wrap up what will be here. We move on to international action. For the United States, November the 15th, so coming up this week, I think that's Friday, November 19th, again, they'll have an international game. The first one's against Canada in Orlando. By the way, speaking of international action, one detail that came out of this, Michael Bradley of Toronto FC, if Toronto FC won the game, they had to pick up his $6 million option. I think Toronto FC still wants Michael Bradley, but not going to have it at that price tag, so that was one of the big things. The other thing, I'll close it here, because we can talk about MLS next season. I'm not going to give you a prediction now, because we don't know. Because the MLS offseason is going to be really good. It's going to be paralleled to somewhat what we do in the regular season. There's going to be some big names. It's going to keep us occupied, and I can't wait to attack that. It's a 12-month league. I will say this, as we get ready, and I talk the U.S. national team, I want to see this. Right now, Christian Pulisic is flying. DeAndre Yedlin's flying. Jordan Morris has had a great postseason. These are some of the core players we have on our U.S. national team. They are feeling good. They are going to this camp feeling good. They have to continue to feel that way. If I see any move in the way they feel, their happiness, if they go from light to darkness, then there's a problem with the U.S. national team. So I am keeping an eye on the wherewithal of the players to see how they are feeling and to see if, in fact, they can take that to the national team. And if the national team setup can keep those guys afloat, can keep them above water in a good space. And hopefully they get a good result against Canada. Subscribe to my YouTube. I am on site. I can be anywhere from Seattle for MLS Cup Final. Max Bretos is my YouTube account. Be there or be square. So long, everybody.